Hello, my name is Marianne and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to welcome you to Recovery in Action Life on Life's Terms. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're glad you're all here, especially newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their discussion to their problems with alcohol. This is an open Big Book step study meeting where we discuss the 12 steps of recovery as they're written in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, with the focus on their application in everyday life in recovery. This is the first session of the seventh cycle of the workshop that was presented on July 27th, 2024, where we started with an overview of the Big Book and began step one. Next week, we'll continue with step one. If you would like to contribute to the seventh tradition, you may do so using the QR codes displayed. Contributions are applied towards the group's expenses and support our service offices. Recordings of the workshop are available, and if you would like to be placed on the distribution list, please send an email to recoveryinaction462@gmail.com to receive the links. These links are unlisted and not public. I request that you not share them at the public level or post on any social media sites. The workshop typically begins with a brief meditation in which an inspirational music video is played. Because of copyright restrictions, it cannot be on the video. However, a link is provided, and I suggest you take a minute, view the video, and take a brief meditation for yourself before you begin the workshop. As the recording begins, the workshop is already in session. Feel free to contact me if you have any additional questions or require my assistance further. I hope you enjoy the workshop. Another custom of this group is to start the workshop by saying the full version of the Serenity Prayer. We're all familiar with the first part, but many of us are unaware that there is a second part to it, and I believe it's this second part of the prayer that reflects what recovery is all about. So if you would all please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. Alcoholism is really a difficult malady to understand. And one analogy that can work as a comparison is, for example, a person who's allergic to bee stings. So let's say, for example, I'm a person who is allergic to bee stings, and my neighbor is a beekeeper. And every day, at least once a day, I go into his backyard with a baseball bat and hit the hives as hard as I can. Every day I get stung, and every day I either have to use an EpiPen or be taken to the hospital because my allergic reaction to bee stings is that my throat closes up and I cannot breathe. Now, is my real problem that I'm allergic to bees, or that I act insanely and keep going to where the bees are and doing something that I know will cause me to get stung? If you look at this analogy, it can be the same as being the same as addiction. Then you can see that what the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous promises us is that being recovered is possible. Now, for bee stings, I will never be cured of having the allergic reaction of my throat closing if I get stung. But I can recover from the obsession to keep going over to my neighbor's yard and beating the hives with a baseball bat in order to get stung. So, for alcoholism, I can never be cured of having the allergic reaction to alcohol. Um, but I can be recovered of the obsession that keeps telling me that it's okay for me to drink, and I can stop thinking about wanting to drink all the time. So the best place for us to get started is, of course, in our big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is the book of instructions on how to work the 12 steps. And the 12 steps are the set of instructions on how to get rid of the things blocking us off from our higher power, how to get connected to God, and how to stay surrendered from alcohol making our life unmanageable. So one thing we need to be very clear on, however, is that just reading the big book without experiencing it is useless. I did that for many years. I thought that just by going to big book meetings and reading the book and sharing was the equivalent of working the steps, because nobody ever sat me down and showed me how. But that is not working the steps. Merely reading it without doing what it says isn't going to get you anywhere, because you can't learn to swim or play the piano or ride a bicycle by just reading the instructions. You need to do what the instructions say, and then you have to practice and practice and practice. So since some of the stuff that we're doing is coming directly from the big book, and what I want to do is, before we actually get into it, I typically do a very high level or cliff note version, or an overview of the overview. I call it the big book speed date, because we're going to just kind of speed through everything. And then once we get through the overview, then we'll go back and we'll break it down into the steps. So when we get into the big book itself, the cover page states that this is the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. So when we say recovered, what do we mean? And as I have said many times, I don't get involved in the controversy of whether it's recovered or recovering. I've never counted how many times it's in there, but the word recovered is in the book. We're talking about being recovered. And the definition of recovered is that the problem is removed. I do not have to make a choice whether I drink alcohol or not, because I don't even think about drinking it. I automatically turn to God instead of alcohol when I'm upset. Alcohol is no longer an option to solve any of my problems. Selfishness and self-centeredness are gone. I'm no longer angry, fearful, or harmful, and my old destructive ways of thinking and acting have been replaced by new and peaceful ones. My old destructive ways of thinking and acting have been replaced by new, peaceful ones. Then we get into the 10th step promise, which is on page 84, because this has become a way of life. So the 10th step promise has become a way of life, which states, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. This is a promise. It says, for by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That's our experience. That's how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. That's such a beautiful promise. Because I remember when I was before I came into the program, when I was still drinking, it was like I was at war with the world. Everything and everybody I was ready to fight with. And the promise to have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, is so freeing. Then we're going to bounce over to page 27 of the big book, which defines recovered as ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. So my whole way of thinking, and it's changing. And then we talk about what it says in the appendix, the spiritual experience. It defines recovered as a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. So our personalities change. And then we get into the foreword of the first edition, which states, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book." And it later goes on to say that the only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. However, the desire to stop drinking is not the only requirement to become recovered. There's other things involved, such as being willing and actually doing everything the big book says to do, which is telling us how to work the 12 steps, which now brings us to step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 1 starts with the doctor's opinion and goes through page 46. The chapter called The Doctor's Opinion answers the question, what's wrong with me? Why, when it's so important for me to stay sober and leave a good impression or set a good example, keep a promise or do a good job, do I start drinking, lose control, and get drunk again? This chapter tells me it's because I'm powerless. I'm powerless over the first drink. And there's 2 things that make me powerless. The first is that I have an allergy to alcohol. And when I put it in my body, it creates a physical craving. The craving feels like, oh, well, my mouth waters and the back of my throat, and my tongue starts to throb, and my heart beats faster and faster, and my stomach starts crunching because it feels like my body's vibrating and my brain's screaming, drink more, drink faster, drink faster. You'll get it right this time. It'll be okay this time. What happened last time won't happen again. You learned your lesson. I got it. I'm only going to have 1 or maybe 2. And these things don't stop until I have nothing left to drink. The second thing that makes me powerless is that I have an obsession of the mind that gets triggered. Doesn't matter if I'm happy, sad, or upset because of some real or imagined occurrence, my brain states, I have to drink or I'm going to die. My brain actually thinks that if I don't drink, I'm going to die. So if I have to have that drink, and I believe this, even though I swore to myself that I'd never do it again, I immediately start drinking as much and as fast as I possibly can. Because I have this allergy that causes a physical craving, and because I have the obsession of the mind, a few things happen. Once I start drinking, I cannot stop. If I do stop, I cannot stay stopped. At certain times, I cannot control the amount of drink, and I eventually break every promise I ever made where alcohol is concerned. The next chapter is Bill's story. And when we read Bill's story, we should start thinking about these questions. Do I think about alcohol the way Bill thinks about alcohol? Do I drink the way Bill drinks? Do I feel the way Bill feels? Am I as hopeless as Bill? You see, in this chapter, Bill tells us what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. He talks about his despair. He talks about his hope, and then he talks about his miraculous recovery. The next chapter is There is a Solution, and page 20 describes the three types of alcoholics. Now, I am not a moderate drinker. When it comes to alcohol, moderation is something I zoom right over my way into excess. Now, I could tell you that maybe I'm a moderate eater, that I do enjoy food, and sometimes I eat a little too much, but I don't obsess about it. I can take it or leave it. Um, but for comparison about being a hard drinker, I guess I could use gambling and smoking, because with um, the hard drinker, uh, they look, a lot of times they look like the alcoholic, but for the right reason, they can stop. So in using gambling and smoking, I could say, I like gambling. I used to like going to Atlantic City, and I've been to Las Vegas, and I like the glitter and the energy and the excitement. And the funny part is, when I gambled, I would typically win. I got lots of comps and luxury suites and dinners and stuff. And I always came away with more money than I started with, or at least I broke even. If I ran out of money, I just stopped. No problem. I would never think of borrowing money to gamble. I would just stop. And then something happened about 20 some odd years, actually it was 24 years ago now. I was in Las Vegas with a boyfriend, and had a great time. Again, I won. I was always winning. I came home with more money than I went there with. However, there was something my then boyfriend said to me when we got back that really stopped me in my tracks. He said that when we were in Vegas, he observed my personality change. He said it was like I was a completely different person, someone he didn't even know. And once I got that feedback, it scared me to death. For those of you who know me, you know that my ex-husband was a compulsive gambler. So I knew, um, I quit gambling on my own. I've never gambled again. I don't buy lottery tickets. I don't buy 50-50 tickets. Um, it's just the way it is. I could quit. Uh, I used to smoke. I used to smoke at least a pack, maybe 2 packs a day for years. And I never doubted that I liked the way I felt when I took that first drag off the cigarette, and I could feel the nicotine starting to flow through my body. I liked that nice feeling of relaxation that I received. And also, like, especially in the workplace, there was like a special camaraderie with the other smokers. But then there came a time when the price of cigarettes was raised to what I considered an unreasonable amount. I think it was something like 50 cents a pack back in the day. And at that point, I decided I was not going to pay that much money for a pack of cigarettes. And I remember distinctly saying, this is my last cigarette, put it out, quit on my own, never smoked again. So for gambling and smoking, I was a hard user who, even when the good enough reason came along, I could stop. But when it comes to alcohol, I cannot moderate the amount of alcohol I drink, nor can I stop drinking. And that's what makes me the real alcoholic. There is no reason on earth, my grandchildren, my daughters, my business, my clients, my jobs, my health, my happiness, my life, or just being embarrassed, just to name a few things, that could ever make me moderate or stop. So remember, the moderate drinker has absolutely no problem giving it up. They're the ones that'll say things like, no thanks, I'm right where I want to be, I've had enough. Or they're the ones that are like, oh, I'm starting to feel it, I can't drink anymore. Yeah. the hard drinker, they may look and they may party right along with the real alcoholics, except when the time comes, they have to stop. They do. But as a real alcoholic, there is nothing that can make me moderate or stop for good. When it comes to alcohol, I cannot predict my behavior or stick to any kind of plan I make. I lie to myself. I try unsuccessfully to have control over the one thing that's the mainstay of my every thought, my every action, and my every waking moment. If I'm not drinking, I'm planning the next drink. And because I'm a real alcoholic, as a real alcoholic, I have one and only one solution. And that one solution is to work the steps as outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in order to connect to my higher power. And if you're a real alcoholic, then you also only have one solution as well. So the next chapter, more about alcoholism, is that I have no power, choice, or control. And once I lose one of these, I've lost all three. Page 34 gives us a great definition of powerlessness as the utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. So what that means it is that I will drink due to circumstances that make me restless, irritable, and discontent. This is the chapter which explains relapse. And that's because they failed to enlarge their spiritual life. And the examples it gives is Jim's story, which shows me that I will drink due to circumstances that make me restless, irritable, and content. The second is the jaywalker, which shows me that negative consequences will not stop me. And the third one is Fred's story, which shows me that I will drink even when nothing's wrong. If I start to think that I can do this on my own, I become arrogant and I think it would be impossible for me to drink again. I need to find a way not to feel restless, irritable, and discontent. And I have to be able to think about and realize the consequences. I have to believe that I need spiritual help to do this. The last sentence of this chapter on page 43 states that his defense must come from a higher power. The next chapter, We Agnostics, is designed to take one more shot at convincing me I need a higher power. Page 44 tells me I only have two choices: to be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis. And these are not always easy alternatives to face. In other words, do I want to die from this disease or am I willing to do this work? I can only have two choices. If I think I have any other options, I won't do the work that's necessary. And some of my old options might have been things like using willpower, smoking, eating, going on a diet, exercising. The list goes on and on. Page 45 states that the big book's main objective is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Notice the word problem is singular. I only have one problem, and that problem is separation from God. Once that's fixed, everything else falls into place. Once I'm connected to my higher power, I do not need to rely on my own power. I can draw on his. It's the same as flipping a switch on the wall and having a light come on. I do not have the power to illuminate anything, but I do have the power to connect what it does. Which then brings us to step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 2 starts on page 46 and states, much to our relief, we discovered that we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with him. Before doing the steps, the only thing that made me feel like my problems didn't matter was alcohol. I will only accept God as my solution when the other things no longer work. So, therefore, the first thing I want to do is I want to drink. Take away the drink, then I'm going to go to food. Take away the food, then I'm going to go to gambling. Take away the gambling, I'm going to want maybe a new job or a new boyfriend or a new car. Take that away, I'm going to have a relationship. A relationship, sex is a good one. Next is shopping. Oh, now I'm going to be a workaholic. Take them all away. The last thing I want to look at is connecting to God by working the steps. If I realize my problem is lack of power, my solution is to get power. And I didn't have that kind of power, because if I did, I would have been able to stop drinking. I would have had the power not to be angry, fearful, or harmful. I needed to find a power outside of myself, and I was the one who decided what that power was. It didn't matter how big or small my definition was. All I had to do for step 2 was to honestly answer yes to the following question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, there's something greater than me that can solve my problem? There's nothing in step 2 about knowing this problem, just that I'm willing to believe that there is one. If I'm desperate enough in step 2, I become willing to believe. As I'm doing this work, I get to see there always has been a higher power, unless I take the credit and think I'm the one doing it. If I see my powerlessness, step 2 is easy, because I have nowhere else to go. Later on, after doing some of this work, I realized that what's written on page 50 is true. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. And the rest of this chapter is designed to give me more reasons to believe that I need God. Page 52 describes the bedevilments, which were that we were having trouble with personal relationships. We could not control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We could not make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness and were full of fear. We were unhappy. We could not seem to be of real help to other people. And this was where I mean, when I first read this, I thought someone they had written my autobiography, because this was my life. And these bedevilments come from an untreated spiritual malady. Before finding God, alcohol was the only thing that numbed these feelings. Again, these bedevilments come from an untreated spiritual malady. Before finding God, alcohol was the only thing that numbed these feelings. Every one of these bedevilments has a relapse underneath it. The unmanageability and the drinking are connected. The 9th step promises are the exact opposite of the bedevilments. If you compare the bedevilments to the promises, you'll see they're the opposites of everything. And page 53 has one of the greatest lines in the entire book. Either God is everything or else he is nothing. If there is no God, I don't stand a chance of ever being happy, healthy, or comfortable in my own skin. Then we have the chapter of how it works. And what this states is that I've got to be convinced. AA's history is amazing. It's one set of coincidences after coincidences. I think that's where we get the term God incidences as opposed to coincidences. but there's a story where the 12 steps are what Bill calls one of those divine interventions. He was about to write them, but he was having difficulty because he was working with the stuff from the Oxford groups. But if we go into the book, Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, on page 161, he says that I'm going to just read to you the excerpt from Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. Finally, I start to write. I set out to draft more than 6 steps. How many more, I did not know. I relaxed and asked for guidance. With a speed that was astonishing considering my jangling emotions, I completed the first draft. It took perhaps an hour. The words kept right on coming. When I reached a stopping point, I numbered the new steps. They added up to 12. Somehow this number seemed significant. Without any special rhyme or reason, I connected them with the 12 apostles. Feeling greatly relieved now, I commenced to reread the draft. So what we're talking about here is in how it works. And therefore, I have to be convinced, A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if he were sought. So as we get into this chapter, it describes an actor who unsuccessfully is trying to run the whole show. This teaches me that even when my motives are good, I'm unable to run my life, or anyone else's for that matter. And I'm unable to do it successfully because when I'm trying to be in control, I'm doing everything based on my character defects, which always cause problems for me. On page 62, it states, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fears, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some point in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So when I'm the actor trying to direct and tell everybody else what to do, I'm putting myself in a position to be hurt. One of the best lines of hope for a happy life is also on page 62. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. To repeat that, so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. If I believe this, then I know I am the only one who has to change. I don't have to wait for someone else to start behaving differently in order for me to recover or to be happy. If I'm the one causing my troubles because I'm reacting to a part of self-triggering character defects, then I am the one who can learn to stop being the catalyst for my troubles. An important point on page 62 states is really the only reason to be in a 12-step program is to work on your recovery. And 12-step recovery, as stated on page 62, is about freeing yourself from playing God. And the quote is, of course, we had to quit playing God. So an interpretation of that is God is the director, the one who sets everything up and knows the complete story and the outcome. I'm the actor who does what I'm told to do. I know it's his story, and I say and do the things based on his cues. He's the father, the one who's all powerful and in charge. I'm the child, the one who's obedient, teachable, watched over, and taken care of. He's the principal, the main one. I'm his agent, the one acting on his behalf and telling everyone how wonderful he is. This chapter also promised that I will get rid of the things that are blocking me off from my higher power, the things that make my life difficult instead of just learning to deal with them. Now, once I understand that, then I'm ready to take the next step, which is step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Step 3 is on page 63, and it's only making a decision to turn my life and my will over to the care of God. Only a decision. When I did step 3, and when we're at step 3, we do not have the power to turn our will and our life over because we're still caught up in our character defects. What we're doing here is making the decision. Because if I did have the power at step 3, we'd only have a 3-step program instead of a 12-step program. All I'm doing in step 3 is making the decision to give my concept of a higher power a try. Once I make that decision, then I'm ready to do some work, which starts in step 4 and goes through step 9. I'm ready to do the work in cleaning up the wreckage that I caused from my drinking. So that brings me to step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Remember that the word moral in step 4 means honest, and it doesn't mean good or bad. Step 4 begins on page 64. Now, one of the things about this, and just to understand it a little bit better, in his best-selling book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Dr. Stephen Covey states that our view of ourselves is like the crazy room at the carnival. This describes exactly what step 4 does for me, because if I've been looking at things in my life through the crazy room, mirror room at the carnival, how can I believe my interpretation of it? All my life, while I'm drinking, I've been looking at my life through the fog and haze of alcohol. So it's distorted. I don't see myself as I really am. If we see the image here, you can see what this little girl really looks like. And then you can see how the distorted mirror makes her look different than she actually appears. The inventories show me that I can't believe my interpretation of how I saw myself before. They show me what my misinterpretations were and what the real truth is so that I can look at things through a clean glass. Step 4 is actually 4 inventories, consisting of 5 columns each. The first inventory is for resentments. The second one is for fears. And the last 2 are for harms, excluding and including our sexual conduct. Once we do that, we're ready to go to step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. This is just facing facts. It's not talking about feelings, nor is it a psychiatry session. All we're looking for here are the things that are blocking us off from our higher power. And the things blocking us off from our higher power are our character defects, which is starting with the next chapter in the book, which is Into Action. Into Action begins with step 5. Then once we do that, next we're at step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. And the key is entirely. Are you entirely ready? It's very short. it's basically saying, do I want my character defects removed? Hopefully the answer is yes. And we get to step 7, humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. The main thing about step 7 is this is where I become a willing participant in my own recovery by letting God mold me into who he wants me to be. In step 1, we admitted we were powerless and that we desperately needed help. With step 7, we finally ask for that help. And that this is an ongoing thing. Then we get to step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Because I had done steps 1 through 7 correctly, I was now a little less selfish, a little less self-seeking, a little less self-centered. And as a result, I began to realize that the things I had done in the past had negative consequences for other people. And now I really wanted to clean that up. So I'm just making the list and becoming willing. Then in step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. This was the step where I start to realize how powerful God is and how greatly and magnificently he can orchestrate everything if we just stay out of the way. So we make apologies and we make restitution, except for the areas in which it would cause more harm. And then that brings us to step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Steps 4 through 9 are about us cleaning up the wreckage that our drinking caused. Now we're in step 10. Continued means we continually do this over and over and over again. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitting it. So that, if I thought I was experiencing God in step 9, step 10 is just part of it. It just becomes part of living life. Step 10 is the exact moment I'm angry, worried, afraid, about to harm someone or have harmed someone. And this is where I immediately do steps 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 5. So I'm continually doing the previous steps 4 through 9 when I'm in step 10. This is living life on life's terms. So if I'm upset with someone, I immediately do a resentment inventory and I stop being angry. If I'm worried or afraid, I immediately do a fear inventory and I stop being frightened. If I'm about to harm someone, I stop doing that. I do the harm inventory and stop hurting another person. Then I move on to step 6. Do I want to have the character defects I just found in this inventory removed? If yes, I do a step 7 and ask God to remove the defects and teach me to be their opposite. And then I act as if I'm someone who has those character assets. If I've harmed someone, I become willing to make amends in step 8. Then I do step 9. And if an apology or restitution is needed, I make it, and then whether or not it's necessary, I make plans on how I'm going to amend my ways so that I don't repeat these same behaviors in the future. Next, I do a step 5. I call my sponsor or a friend and I just say something like, I was just jealous and mean-spirited. I don't have to go into detail because the word resentment comes from the word senatori, meaning to feel. Put the re in front of it, and it means to feel again. So if someone did me wrong, I can get rid of the negative feelings immediately by doing a step 10, or I can carry it around with me and keep refilling it. Then every time I think about the situation or talk about it, the other person becomes more wrong and I become more right, and then I have a justified resentment. As a result, I feel tense, upset, horrible, maybe even wanting to drink. Then when there's another wrong, either by this person or someone else, all the wrongs become bigger than they are. The big book tells me how to get rid of these feelings before they block me off from my higher power. And that's by doing step 10 immediately. By doing step 10 often, I learn many valuable lessons. The main one being that God is the one who removes my character defects, but only when he thinks I've learned enough and practiced the opposite enough. Let me say that again. The main one being that God is the one who removes my character defects, but only when he thinks I've learned enough and practiced the opposite enough. That's when he removes the defect, and then it will be replaced by the proper thing. In step 10, I learned to be grateful for everything that's been happening in my life, even the things I do not like. I learned that everything that happens to me is allowed by my higher power, either to teach me something I need to learn or to protect me from something later on. So I learned that this again is only for me. And again, it's only for you. Whatever someone else does or whatever someone else says, whatever happens to them has nothing to do with me. I can share in another person's joy and help if necessary, but there's nothing I need outside of me to make me feel okay on the inside, and there's nothing on the outside that can make me feel bad unless I internalize it and carry it with me. This I learned in step 10. This is the day by day living life on life's terms. And it shows me how powerful God is and how wonderful he is at teaching me the things that I need to learn. And it's always ongoing. Doesn't matter how much time we have in the program. It also shows us he's really got a great sense of humor. So in step 10, by doing step 10 so often, this 10th step promise, which is on page 84, and we read a little bit of it earlier, this starts coming true. I stop fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. I'm put in a place of neutrality, safe and protected, and the obsession was lifted, so my problem was removed. The minute I realized how magnificent my higher power was, it just slides me right into step 11, which is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. Step 11 is where I actually carry out that decision I made in step 3 to turn my life and my will over to the care of God. I'm now more willing to have God run every aspect of my life. I learned based on my experience with the previous 10 steps, anything God has in store for me is better than anything I could plan for myself. Here, my prayer life changes and I stop telling God what he should do. And instead, I have 2 prayers. The first one is thank you. I express gratitude and appreciation, which keeps me in that constant state of gratitude. And the second is, please tell me what you want me to do and give me the strength to carry that out. That's the thy will, not mine, be done. Steps for instructions rather for step 11 are on page 86. And they tell me that when we retire at night, we constructively review my day. I review my day without beating myself up. I'm looking for anything I might need to do a step 10 on. I'm looking for anything that needs to be corrected. And more importantly, I'm looking to see what lessons I learned that day. They also state, on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. Based on what I found out the night before, I make plans on how I'm going to make the needed corrections. Additionally, I make plans on how I'm going to incorporate the lessons I learned yesterday into what I'm going to do today. The last part of the instruction on pages 87 and 88 tell me what to do to stay connected to my higher power, reconnect as needed, and constantly look for his guidance and inspiration throughout the day. And they are As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, "Thy will be done." We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we're not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life ourselves. And that brings us now to step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. The chapter, Working with Others, is all about step 12. Step 12 states, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. A spiritual awakening meaning that my way of thinking and my way of acting have drastically changed for the better. I know there's a God personal to me who loves me, is always there for me, and only wants the best for me. The knowledge of the constant pressure, guidance, and love of my higher power is the most important thing without exception. And then step 12 then states, carry this message to alcoholics. The message here is, if you're an alcoholic, there is a way out of all this misery. Just do exactly what it states to do in the first 164 pages of the big book, and you'll never drink again, nor will you ever feel as bad as you do right now. So therefore it says, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And these principles are things like honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, self-discipline, love, perseverance, spiritual awareness, service, unity, and trust. So that completes the very high level overview and transitions us directly into starting step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And the first thing that I want to look at, and this is in the book itself. I want to call everybody's attention to the workbook, which is the Unmanageability Questionnaire, because I plan on us really diving into this next week. But the Unmanageability Questionnaire addresses these questions. And what I'd like you to do is start looking at these questions as we prepare for next week. And if you look at these questions, they're basically the bedevilments that we talked about earlier. But this is very useful in having in looking at the first step, because it doesn't matter how much time you've got in the program, we could still be experiencing unmanageability. Thank you so much for your participation. I hope you enjoyed the workshop, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And now, please join me in our closing prayer, which is St. Faustina's Prayer for Mercy. Eternal God, in whom mercy is endless and the treasury of compassion inexhaustible, look kindly upon us and increase your mercy in us, that in difficult moments we might not despair nor become despondent, but with great confidence submit ourselves to your holy will, which is love and mercy itself. Amen.